Top of the morning to you. Hope they find you well. Oh, I thought we'd have a little chat here. This is a Reese Pilot. This is a one of probably many electronic brake controllers for your vehicle. If you tow a trailer over a certain weight, a lot of states mandate that you have to have a braking system, whether it be hydraulic over electric, or electric brakes. This is electric brake controller. Basically, in a nutshell, what this is on the trailer there are old style brake drums and shoes, and inside there, instead of a little hydraulic cylinder, they have a electromagnet, and this controls that, and it adjusts the braking action since you have different weights and on the trailer. Hopefully this will come out. It's so freaking windy today, it's not even funny. It's just been blowing non-stop for about a week now. It's getting a little bit tedious. And today's trash day, in case you didn't care. Anyway, a friend of mine, he's just convinced that this has gone bad, and if you have a tandem axle trailer, I think you have to have at least one set of electronic or hydraulic. You have to have one set of brakes on one axle at least. A lot of them have two sets, so it's 4 total. They're not terribly complicated. A lot of the big parts houses actually sell the parts for electronic brakes. Anyway, and this came out of his truck to control his trailer, and he's having trouble with it. And instead of doing some investigation, he got angry and just took it someplace. And he didn't tell me he wanted it repaired. He just told me he wanted a new controller installed because he was just convinced that the controller was bad. Which is kind of interesting to me. These really are, all these are really an adjustable power supply. I mean, there's a few other little things in there, but nothing major. All they do is, there's usually a braking amount, kind of a ratio or whatever they call this control. You can correct me. And all it does is take the, adjust the 12 volts down so you can apply the correct amount of braking pressure to the trailer, so it doesn't, so that it doesn't braking, or it doesn't skid. Electronic brakes are kind of interesting. There's no real feedback in the system, so I think you constantly have to adjust this. You know, if you have a big load and you get this adjusted right and then take it off, then the electronic braking is going to be too aggressive for the trailer, and the wheels will probably lock. But that's okay, you know, as long as your load doesn't vary a ton. You know, if you just have a skid steer or something like that, where you always got the same load on there, these probably work just fine. I've seen a few of these over the years, and these are really pretty basic. All these are they're hooked to your to the vehicle. A lot of newer vehicles, like my pickup, actually has a it's built into the wiring from the factory, and all you do is buy the appropriate plug that goes under the dash and then attach the controller, and everything else is pre-wired, which is really nice. Or you can, this really isn't a terrible wiring job. Basically, in a nutshell, I'll warn you first that at least on the Reese, and maybe some of the other ones, the color coding for these wires is really weird. And I strongly suggest that you look up the individual controller before you go plugging things into your car or truck and blow crap up. So if you don't do that, that's doom on you. That's just dumb. Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, you would think black would be ground and red would be the battery, and these might be some other things. Not so much. On this one, the blue, I actually had to write this down because it's so goofy. And actually there is a standard, but it's a kind of some trailer standard. Blue is the output to the brakes on the trailer. Red goes to your brake pedal, like the brake light switch. So this trips on and off. White is ground, and black goes to the battery. Now a lot of them say don't hook into the existing wiring for any of this stuff. Run a new wire for the battery and a new wire for the output to the trailer, which is probably a good practice. And it really isn't that complicated. Anybody that's worked on vehicles a little bit could probably figure this out. And you probably need a fuse in the battery lead. One of the things I wouldn't do, I would not use these crimp ends. These things are nothing but trouble. Over the years, I've worked on a number of these little brake controller things. These things don't break. They break when they're supposed to. That didn't come out right at all. They work when they're supposed to. They don't malfunction. At least what I've seen. There's nothing in them. Most of the problems I see are the wiring up here. There. Happy now? Damn wind. The connectorization between the vehicle and the trailer, that's a big culprit. The wiring on the trailer, that's a big culprit too. Or the mechanics in the electronic braking themselves. One of them's hanging up, one of them's sticking. They haven't been serviced in the last 100 years. Since sometimes those trailers can sit, they can atrophy and get a little stiff. One of the things I've noticed over the years is what few friends I have that have bigger trailers, a couple of them regularly take them out and drive them around and use them, even though they sit in garages, just to exercise the equipment on it, which is probably a pretty smart idea. That way when it comes time to use the thing, you aren't fixing it. There's nothing more frustrating than needing a tool or a device and then you got to fix the thing before you use it. That always gets my goat. And I don't know why he thought this was bad. I couldn't get a straight answer out of him other than it didn't work. He was quite in a huff about it. There's a reason not to use those crimp connectors there. They come apart easy. Those things are a joke. These are probably just fine if you know how to install them. I'll have another video about that. These are junk. Anyway, let me shut you off here. I need to get a piece of equipment. We'll do a little testing and see if this is really broke. Well, we at least have a light. What I've done is basically I hooked the power and the ground up. And for the trailer, I hooked a light bulb, a 12-volt light bulb. And this would be the connection to your brake switch or your brake foot feet. Basically what happens when you step on the foot feet, this goes to 12 volts positive and then the controller does its work. Now here, one of the other things I suggest you do is if you're unfamiliar with this, just don't do it. You could damage the wiring in your car. That's all there is to it. Now, that being said, if you're careful and use your brains a little bit and do things step by step, I think you'll be okay. But if you get stumped, I think somebody would rather install this and work on this. I mean, you might do a couple, if you're unfamiliar with this, there's a couple rudimentary things you could do. You could mount this in the location you want, you could maybe hook the ground up and maybe run a wire to the battery. Those things would be okay. If you do that, make sure you tape that off or just don't hook it up. But nobody wants that big jumbled mess nobody wants to have a big jumbled mess brought into their shop. It's kind of like taking your transmission apart and then taking it to the transmission place. You're going to get the eye and you're going to look like a dummy. One of the things that, the other thing you're going to do is if you're going to fool with one of these and you're unfamiliar with it, find the manual. Almost all these places have the manual online as a PDF. It's easy to read. Do a little snooping around. I'm gonna cuss Reese a little bit because they have the manual on how to hook it up and adjust the thing, but nowhere in the manual does it say what the colors are. I found the colors on another page that was totally unrelated, and it was basically how to test the thing, even though I had a pretty good idea how to test it. Most of these have a button. They have 2 controls, maybe 3. Most of them at least have the 2 controls. One is the manual braking. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit on this. Yeah. And that C means connected, I think. If you... Oh, there it went out. Okay. So if you don't have a trailer, the lights go out. You hook your trailer up, and the connection goes on. Remember, our trailer is this light bulb. We'll set the light bulb there. Most of them, like on this Reese, I believe this number that is here is actually the voltage that is being applied to the brakes. Yeah. Yeah, there's full 12 volts, and there is almost nothing. And if you watch this thing, it doesn't just snap on, it kind of ramps up, so it's kind of, it slowly starts applying the brakes. Some of them have some of the controllers have an adjustment for, I can't remember if that's called sync or what that's called. It adjusts that delay between when the brakes get applied and then the actual braking action or braking signal goes out to the brakes. But you can see here, and this one you can actually sort of vary the, you can actually adjust that plunger. Now, with the control sensor from the foot feet, it just comes on. But again, you can see that it ramps up. So I'd say that this thing is probably just fine. Lovely. I remember reading about that in the book. If you notice, we've kind of somehow we flipped the thing over. You can sort of program the display. You son of a... Anyway, you can program the... I wonder if that resets if you take away the power. Let's see if it's that smart. Yeah, oh cool. So if you lose power to the battery, you're going to lose programming to your controller, or how it was set up. Anyway. And that really takes a while to ramp up, doesn't it? So I'd say that this thing probably works just fine. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with this. What happens if you... that's interesting. You can kind of add additional braking to the controller. This is probably a safety feature, so if you're trying to brake and for some reason the brakes don't come on, you can reach down and kick them into gear. That being said too, if you have a system on your trailer where, what is it, I can't think what the name of that's called, where basically if your trailer comes loose, there's usually a little tether between the trailer and the tow vehicle, and when that happens, it pulls a little pin out, and there's usually a battery on the trailer, and that kicks the electronic braking in gear so the thing doesn't go flying down the highway or whatever. I'm not sure how that works. That system works with these controllers. So you may want to do some investigation. I would investigate all this very thoroughly. Don't take anything that I've said here for gospel. You know, for all I know, another model of this controller might have different wiring, even though they all seem to be the same. And I know on some of the wiring interfaces or looms on the vehicles that you can buy it and just plug it right in. Sometimes there's an extra wire, but they're very good about labeling them. And what to do with the extra wire, I would just tape it up and don't do anything with it. Most of the time, and what's funny is on the vehicle, the wiring colors make more sense. So you're going to be mixing and matching some colors, and don't pay attention to the color so much as you do the labeling. Read the labeling very carefully. Yeah, this thing works just fine. I had to hook this up in my truck just for fun. You can get those wiring harnesses anywhere. I believe that leftover connection on those wiring harnesses, there's only 4 wires here, and I've seen 5 wires. I believe it's some sort of a it's kind of like lighting to the trailer. It's sort of an indicator. It's not lighting, it doesn't supply lighting to the trailer. It taps into it and tells you that the lighting is lit. I guess you would use it for an indicator or something. I'm not sure what you'd use it for. There's really nothing to go wrong in these things. There's nothing wrong with this. This is just dumb. Yeah, that ramps up pretty nice. Man, that takes a while to come on. Like I said, some of the other controllers have a I can't remember if it's called delay or what that other is, and it adjusts how quickly the brakes come on. Reese has probably figured out that this is a pretty good compromise, which it does seem. I mean, it seems to take several seconds to come up to full power. Actually, it seems to take about a second for every volt there is. Maybe a little quicker, but it does come on. I'm not sure how much current these can supply also. The manual said, I think on this model said 2 to 6 axles, but don't take my word for it. At least, can't remember if that was 2 to 6 axles or 2 to 6 brakes now. I'd have to look at the manual again. It must be in the number of brakes. I don't know, very interesting. But like I said, there's nothing wrong with this thing. It's fine. He gave me the bracket too, so. Actually, I'd stopped by to drop some tools off to him, and he was busy cussing his bill. So basically, there was nothing wrong with this. Probably what it was his wiring. If the connectorization was as cheesy as that's just sad. Somehow I flipped that over again. That's kind of annoying. Not sure how that works. Like I said, unplugging it seems to reset the power, but it doesn't seem to reset that control side. The documentation I found on this was a tiny bit, I guess, sketchy or lax. I didn't see. It seemed like they spent more time on how to mount the thing than how it actually operated. I'm sure there are other controllers. Some of them probably are more sophisticated. Knowing today's technology, there's probably some that have kind of preset memories. That would be a cool idea, actually. If that hasn't been invented, I call dibs on that. That's patent pending. But you know, you could have if you had a cargo trailer, you could have the presets for loaded and unloaded. There's probably a lot of cool things you could do with that. But that's how to test the thing. And like I said, that wiring can be very confusing on these. To me, it doesn't make any sense, even though it's probably been that way since time began. I'm not sure what's inside these. I've never actually pried one apart to peek in there. There probably isn't a lot, even though they seem to get quite a bit for them. It is a safety item. Oh, terribly sorry. it is a safety device, so I would treat it very carefully. Keep in mind that I would think real hard before I put a fuse in there. You might put a circuit breaker in there, a resettable circuit breaker. You would do what the manufacturer suggested on that, since it is a safety device. One screw up and you could end up upside down in the ditch, and it wouldn't be pretty. So there you go. How to test your, sort of test your Reese pilot, at least. Like I said, it may apply to other products. Anybody with any brain cells could look at that and see what's going on. But at least you need a load. You need some kind of a load. Let's just say a small light bulb would probably work just fine. Again, if you have trouble, I would take it to a professional place, or any place that specializes in trailers. Again, I've worked on a few of these. It's always something stupid. Yeah, your ground isn't working right, or I'd say about 90% of them are the wiring. That wiring really takes a beating. It's tough to keep it cleaned up and in good shape. Anyway, if you have a question or comment, feel free to leave it. Take it easy.